Strength in Numbers, exploring the role of industrial unions through the 1894 encounter between the Great Northern Railway and the American Railway Union. Junior individual performance, Strom, Norcross. Oh, hello, son. I'm glad you came. My grandson, an industrial union organizer, in the auto industry no less. Today, in 1937, you have real opportunities to make a difference for labor. Very different from my days on the railroad. I haven't looked in this box in ages, but I got it out because there are things from the past, my past, that you need to understand. You see, son, the exploration of industrial unions had its first major success in 1894 when I was a fireman shoveling coal on the Great Northern Railway. That's when Eugene Deb formed the American Railway Union, and we exchanged our small brotherhoods for an industrial union. Through the resulting encounter between the Great Northern Railway and the American Railway Union, the industrial union helped us improve our working conditions through collective bargaining and independent arbitration. But industrial unions encountered strong opposition, struggling for over 40 years. But now the government has given you a chance by passing the National Labor Relations Act. You need to hear about what it was like in my days so that you will grab this opportunity. You see, son, things were different back in 1893. There were none of these newfangled cars or trucks going about. The railroad was the lifeblood of our country. And Mr. James J. Hill's railroad, the Great Northern Railway, was taking lead in connecting the United States from west to east. At the same time, there was a big increase in unskilled labor as waves of people were emigrating from other countries in search of the American dream. This made it so these big companies, like the Great Northern Railway, could almost do whatever they wanted to their workers. Back then, before the American Railway Union came along, we skilled workers were organized into single trade unions. Brotherhoods, we called them. There weren't many workers in any given brotherhood. This meant that we had very little power when negotiating for our rights. Then, in 1893, a depression hit the economy full force, and things got tough. The railroad, like all industries, started squeezing their workers by cutting wages and replacing folks. It was that year that Eugene Deb formed the American Railway Union in an effort to help the workers. Deb believed that by uniting both skilled and unskilled workers into one big industrial union, we would have more power when negotiating for better working conditions. But it was a new idea, so Deb had his work cut out for him, getting the railroad workers to join him and railroad companies to listen to him. Yes, son, it was 1894, just 8 months after the formation of the ARU. That's when I heard Eugene Deb speak to us men on the Great Northern Railway. I, Eugene Deb, a former member of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen, stand before you today to urge you to join the American Railway Union. The economy is tough, gentlemen, and rail workers are feeling the pain. Last August, your wages were cut by up to 30%, and Mr. James J. Hill replaced many of your coworkers with immigrants who would work for less money. Now Mr. Hill is rumored to be talking of further cuts. Ask yourself, gentlemen, is your job safe? Can your brotherhood stand up to the might of the Great Northern Railway? The brotherhoods are no longer adequate to bargain with these mighty railroad giants. If we can gather enough railroad employees into one big industrial union, no company will be able to resist our demands. There is strength in numbers. Now, son, I was impressed by Deb's speech, but I still had to think carefully about whether to join his ARU. The Brotherhood leaders were telling us that the ARU wasn't necessary, but I saw that the Brotherhoods were no longer able to protect our jobs, or even keep our wages high enough so that we could support our families. I thought Debs was right, and that we could do more if we all banded together. So I joined the ARU, and it turns out over 150,000 others joined too, just in the first 8 months. Debs had a clear message that one large industrial union was the only way that we workers would have power when negotiating. Then it all came to head when on April 13th, 1894, Mr. Hill decided to replace some switchmen in Butte, Montana that were ARU members, but they went on strike before they could be fired. Now, before the formation of the ARU, this would have just been a problem with the switchmen, but not anymore. Bound together by the American Railway Union, rail workers from all different trades went on strike with the ARU, shutting the railroad down from Montana to Minneapolis, crippling transportation out of the Midwest. Now, son, you can imagine Mr. Hill was not in favor of an industrial union. He realized that we workers were exploring a new form of power, and that this power was a threat to him. I attended a meeting between Mr. Hill, Mr. Debs, about a week into the strike. Mr. Hill did not even want to talk to this new ARU. You should have seen him. He said, "Welcome, gentlemen. I understand you wish to negotiate on behalf of the workers on my road, but I do not recognize the American Railway Union as a representative of my employees. The ARU is making this problem bigger than it need be. Let's get our men back to work and negotiate wages as we always have, trade by trade." Now, son, Hill tried all sorts of shenanigans during the strike to get his trains moving again. He tried to hire scabs, those scallywags who work through strikes. He even lobbied the U.S. government to send military to intervene, but Debs held firm. Meanwhile, Hill was under great pressure from other big businessmen, and even the U.S. government to get his trains moving again. Understand, in 1894, Minneapolis produced over 90% of America's flour, and much of it traveled the Great Northern Route. So when Hill's trains didn't move, the American people suffered. By the end of April, local authorities had convinced Mr. Hill and Mr. Debs to state their cases to an independent board of arbitration, headed by flour tycoon Charles Pillsbury. In 1894, this was an exploration of a completely new way to settle a strike, and it only came about because of the power gained by unifying rail workers into an industrial union. We had found strength in numbers. On May 1, 1894, the board ruled overwhelmingly in favor of the ARU, awarding 97.5% of our demands. While publicly, Mr. Hill congratulated Debs and the ARU on their shrewd handling of the strike. Business leaders nationwide reacted by pressuring the U.S. government to put a stop to the emergence of industrial unions. Just 2 months later, when the ARU, encouraged by their victory against the Great Northern Railway, called a strike against the Pullman Company in Chicago, the U.S. government stepped in and supported business, not labor, sending military troops to end the strike, and even imprisoned union leaders. They did their best to destroy us. But remember my story. The first major exploration of the power of an industrial union was in 1894, when the ARU exchanged small brotherhoods for an industrial union. Through the resulting encounter, the ARU proved that an industrial union gives labor power when negotiating. But that was 40 years ago. It has taken the efforts of many men like Eugene Deb to get where we are today. Businesses will not give you your rights. You must take them. Take advantage of government support. You're working to build an industrial union in the auto industry, but it doesn't have to stop there. Steel, rubber, electronics. Industrial unions give labor a stronger voice, a voice that should be heard. What Eugene Deb told us still holds true today. 10,000 times has the labor movement stumbled and bruised itself. But notwithstanding all of this, labor is today the most vital and potential power this planet has ever known.